everybody and welcome to Flock Talk. Today we're going to be going over the sort of basic things you need to know in order to take the best possible care for your parrotlet. Now the care guides I'm about to give are pretty general among most species of parrots. There's going to be differences when it comes to like significantly larger birds and the really tiny birds, but overall I'm going to be covering the basic things that you'll need for taking care of almost any parrot species. So this video was a requested video by James Rayleigh. He wanted me to make a parrotlet care video or a sort of cage tour, but since I've done cage tours in the past, we're just going to be doing the basics of parrotlet care here, going over things like their diet, nutrition, and cage size requirements and enrichment and sorts of things that you can be doing to make sure that your little birds are living the best possible lives that you can provide. So the first thing I'm going to go over is cage sizings. Now as you can probably see in the background here, my girls have got a very large cage. It's taller than me. So that cage is incredibly large. It's huge, and as far as parrotlet requirements go, that is exceeding expectations, but again, that's something that I could afford and something that I felt was best for the health of my birds. I know I work 40 hours a week, and most of you guys probably do too, or you go to school 40 hours a week, so it's important to provide them with the most space we can possibly give them, because it's not fair to them to be trapped in the minimum cage size when we can get them something so much better that still allows them the space to fly. You definitely don't need to be going as extreme as I have there, but you do want your bird to be able to flap a little bit in the cage so they can get proper amounts of exercise when we are away. Ideally, we don't want them to be in the cage much at all, but there are things that prevent us from being able to do that, such as work and school. So when it comes to having to be in a cage, the bigger, the better. But we have to watch out for bar spacings. So for parrotlets, you want the bar spacing to be about 1/2 inch and no bigger than that. The reason for this is that if the bar spacing is bigger than 1/2 inch, your bird is going to be able to fit their head through the gaps in the cage. And that is really incredibly dangerous. We do not want that happening because they can get stuck, they can try and shove their chest through there, and they can seriously hurt themselves. So it's important that your bird cannot possibly fit their head through the bars in their cage, as it just becomes a dangerous situation. So for parrotlets, the smallest possible cage size you can give them is 18 by 18 by 24 inches. And when I say that this is the smallest you can give them, I mean that this is meant to be a bedtime cage. That cage size your bird should not be in when they're awake and active for more than 2 to 3 hours at the absolute most. And the reason for this is that it's a very small space for incredibly active birds. If they're going to be in there for 4, 5, up to 8 hours a day, they need to have enough space to get the proper amounts of enrichment that they actually need. So if your bird isn't able to get out most of the day, they need to be able to get that much space and flight and exercise and mental enrichment in their cage as possible. And the bigger the cage you can provide, the easier it's going to be for them to do that. Because if you aren't providing them with enough space and enough ability to move around, what can happen is your bird can start to get really bored, they can start to pluck their feathers, and they can start gaining weight and becoming extremely unhealthy. So it's important to give them as much space as we can possibly give them. Now with parrotlets specifically, you do not ever want to be keeping more than one parrotlet in a cage. The cage I've got back here is a duplex cage. It's like a double-decker bus. It's got 2 separate sections and the birds cannot reach each other at any way possible. And that is absolutely crucial when it comes to this species, because parrotlets are not huge flocking birds. They tend to fly solo or in little mated pairings. In the very, very most, they'll be in groups of 4 or 8 with other mated groups. So it's very important that we aren't sticking them in a small confined space with another random bird, because it is very, very likely that these birds can kill one another. And that seems very unlikely when you're looking at a very tiny bird like this, like, oh, they're so small and fragile, they could never hurt anybody. But anyone who's ever owned a parrotlet can tell you that they are not little dainty birds. They will take on anything 8 times their size. They are not afraid. They do not take their size into account when it comes to trying to get into a fight. They are very sassy birds, they are very spirited, and they are very aggressive. So parrotlets do not need a second bird in order to be happy. They are best alone, provided that they get enough enrichment to support the mental stimulation that they need. So the next most important thing when it comes to your bird is their feet. And the easiest mistake we can make when it comes to setting up a cage and putting toys and perches in there is using dowel perches. Now, dowel perches are something that get marketed to you all the time. It'll be in every cage that you buy. They come for free inside them. You can buy packages, you can buy sandpaper perch covers, and these are very bad for the health of your bird. Dowel perches can cause a lot of friction in their feet, which can cause all sorts of sores, which can cause bumblefoot, and it's really not good. They're very solid surfaces, they're very slippery. It's kind of like if you were walking on monkey bars the whole day. You know, if you're out at a park playing with monkey bars when you were a kid, your hands get blistered very fast. And the same thing happens to your bird because those dowel perches are super smooth and their feet are not designed for super smooth surfaces. The best thing for the health of your bird's feet is going to be a variety of perches. Now, I made a whole video on this going into far more detail as to why it's important, but the more variety, the different thicknesses and angles and textures that you can get inside your bird's cage for their feet is going to give them the best health that you can possibly provide. The more they're using their feet, the way that they're sitting differently and distributing the weight differently, the more of a workout they're going to get their feet. It's going to be a lot healthier for them than sitting there on the exact same surface facing the exact same angle every single day. The next thing you're going to want to take into account when it comes to the health of your bird is the sorts of toys that you give them. You're going to find a lot of toys in the store that simply aren't suitable for birds, despite the fact that they're marketed for them. You're going to find things that are hard plastic and pretty boring. You're going to find things that are covered in bells and mirrors and all sorts of really hard objects that can actually cause all sorts of health problems when it comes to your bird. Now, mirrors are probably one of the worst things you can buy a bird. No matter how many times you see a cute picture of a cockatiel or a budgie looking at themselves in a mirror or chatting with it, it is not healthy. Because of the way that birds' brains are created and how far along they are in their mental development, they can sometimes not distinguish the difference between reality and a reflection. So your bird can become obsessed. They can actually stop eating and become so infatuated with this reflection that it's super unhealthy for them. Aside from that point, they can end up becoming extremely erratic with their behaviors because their hormonal imbalances are so out of whack. Your birds are trying to mate with this reflection and it's not reciprocating and it's confusing. And what's going to happen is you can induce egg laying, you can have masturbation in male birds and female birds, which can cause all sorts of infections and all sorts of hormonal imbalances that are super unhealthy. Mirrors do not provide much in the way of mental enrichment. All they can do is harm your bird. The best sorts of toys for birds are ones that are going to be helping along their natural behaviors. So things like foraging and chewing and things that they would be doing anytime else when they're out in the wild. And obviously you can't have a perfect wild environment in your home, but what you can do is buy toys that are more easy for them to play with and things that are actually going to help stimulate those natural behaviors without being detrimental to their health. One thing parrotlets tend to absolutely love to do, and most species of birds for that matter, is forage. So foraging, the basic premise of it is that you're hiding food and the bird is finding it. Now this doesn't mean you have to hide a lot of food, this doesn't even mean that you have to hide treats. You can hide pellets if that's what your bird's eating, you can hide fresh vegetables, you can do whatever the heck you like as long as the bird is having to work for it. And what foraging does is it makes sure that the bird is extremely motivated to keep playing. It gives them more reason to be interested in what they're working for. So instead of playing with the same toy every day and it's getting boring and it's, chewing this, chewing that, it can start to get pretty boring for them. But what are you doing? So what you can do by implementing foraging is it just helps give those birds a little bit more motivation to go searching around their cage. They'll be more likely to explore new toys, they'll be less afraid of new objects, and it'll help get birds testing out all sorts of new materials and keeping their beaks trimmed. And foraging toys aren't that expensive either, and you can make them out of almost anything. You can buy finger traps at the dollar store, stick them on a string, and just hide little sunflower seeds in there. All you gotta do is tuck them in the weaves and your birds will go nuts. It's one of my guys' favorite things. Another really easy one is twine balls. Just stuff some millet inside the ball, and again, your birds will just sit there for hours trying to chew through the wood to get any of the little bits of millet that are hiding inside. When your bird is having to actively figure out how to get something out of a toy, they're using their brain more, they're thinking, they're trying to figure out how to get the result to happen. And so by giving them these sorts of things, you're providing another layer of enrichment that is a lot higher than that of just clanging a bell around. So when it comes to toys, it's great and all if you have a great variety, but it can't stay the same all the time. If you have the toys sitting in that exact same position for months on end, your bird is going to get bored because it's not fun anymore. They've been staring at it for months. Why would it be fun if it's been sitting in the same position? The easiest thing to do to help keep them mentally engaged while also saving money is to just rotate the toys around. Have a couple toys that stay in their cage, and then every week or so, just switch them around. Either change the position that they're in, pull an old toy out and put a new one in, change it up a little bit, switch where the perches are. Make the arrangement of the cage a little bit different so the bird isn't coming home to the exact same environment every time. So, diets. Diets are, oddly enough, a pretty controversial topic when it comes to parrot keeping, because there is the lovely thing called pellets. And the reason why most parrot keepers and most veterinarians will recommend pellets is because they're lower in fat and more nutritionally complete than just feeding seeds. Now, the reason why we want lower fat diets when it comes to captive birds is that your birds are not flying nearly as much as they are in the wild. So when you're feeding them these seed-based diets, the birds aren't getting all the nutrition that they need and they aren't able to keep up with that calorie intake. Your birds can't burn off the fat as fast of a rate as a wild parrotlet might. Pellets are usually the best option, but it's also important which pellet that you choose. There are lots of brands out there that use food colorings and additives and sugars and all sorts of things just to get birds to eat their food, but these things aren't intended for a parrot to eat. They have been linked to kidney damage and liver diseases, so it's important that we take a look at the ingredients of the pellets that we feed, so that way you're not doing worse than seeds and you're not doing the reverse of what you intended to do by feeding these foods. Consult your avian veterinarian and see what they might recommend. The top pellet brands tend to be Rowdy Bush, Totally Organics, or Harrison's. Those are usually the top 3 that most people tend to go with because of their nutritional value. Now, your parrot's diet should not be 100% seeds or pellets. Pellets should make up about 50% of their diet, but that is by all means not everything that they should be getting fed. Parrots don't just eat seed in the wild, and most birds don't. They spend most of their time eating fresh fruits off of trees and eating lots of leafy greens and doing all sorts of things like that. So we need to make sure that while pellets do provide a lot of nutrition, that we are giving them the proper nutrition that they need by getting them the rest of those food groups. So one of the most important foods for a parrot's diet is leafy green vegetables. So that'll be your lettuces and your spinaches and your arugulas and your dandelion leaves, things that are really nutrient dense that are really dark green. Broccoli is a large favorite of birds, and again, variety is key. Sweet potato is a really nutrient-dense food. If you just cook it up and mash it, most birds will absolutely fall in love with sweet potato. You got broccoli and dandelion leaves and carrots, and there's so many foods that are really easy just to feed your bird. Another really nutrient-dense food that you can be feeding your parrots is sprouts. And people tend to think that sprouts are really complicated because they can go moldy really easily, and some people use apple cider vinegar and it gets really intense, and some people go super hardcore with sprouting their seeds for their birds and they make whole fields of sprouts. But it is not that hard. Now, for sprouting seeds, the process is super simple. All you gotta do is soak seeds overnight, rinse them out, and then leave them, and then just rinse them every morning. That's all you have to do, and the sprouts will slowly grow. As soon as you start to see those little tails come out, you know that they're full of nutrients and your birds will love them. So feeding your birds a well-rounded diet is great, but it's not all that helpful when they can't absorb all the nutrients from their food. And how they do this is through getting UV light. And this is something that most people have never heard of before, is that birds actually do require a UV light. UV lights that are designed for reptiles are different than ones that are needed for birds. And the reason for this is simply just because of their biology and what they require to properly absorb their nutrients. Now, one thing that is often really high in reptile UV bulbs is UVB. And this is something we do not need a lot of when it comes to birds. We rely a lot more on the UVA. Having too much UVB can actually damage their eyes. You only want about 0.05% of UVB in your avian spectrum light. The sort of things you'll be looking for in an avian full spectrum UV light is 0.05% UVB, 4% UVA, 5500K, and 91 CRI. Those specs are incredibly important because if you go out and just grab a reptile bulb, they're going to have a ton of UVB. And it doesn't seem like that big of a deal when you think about how it's in the sunlight and stuff, but birds do spend most of the day in the shade, and reptiles tend to bask out in the sun in order to properly digest their foods. What this bulb replicates is sun at its highest point in the day, when it is at its strongest. And obviously the sun isn't at this point in the entire day. So when you're sitting with this bulb, you don't want to have it on pointed at your bird all day because they spend most of the day hiding in the trees anyways, so they're not getting that much of it. Generally, you only want this on your bird for about 1 hour a day, not a whole lot more than that. And what this is going to help do is help their body properly be able to absorb all the nutrients from the food that you give them so they don't become vitamin deficient. Now the bulb I use for my birds is the Feather Bright, not sponsored obviously. Now the reason why I use this bulb is because I've tried a variety of others and this was the one that I found actually had the best results. I have a few before and after pictures of my birds of their feather quality, and the difference you can see is incredible. Their feathers are so much shinier, they're a lot more kind of luminous, and it's just, they're phenomenally healthier simply changing between the bulb I was using before and this one. So when it comes to caring for your parrotlet, one of the most important things is the time that they get out of the cage. And the reason why this is so important, really? So the reason why this is so important is because it is the most enrichment and social activity and exercise that your bird is able to get. And the general minimum people tend to give is about 2 hours, and that is very low. It's incredibly low. At the very least, I try to get at least 4 hours in. And the reason for this is that your birds simply cannot get enough exercise and mental stimulation, only spending 2 hours out of the day being outside of their cage. Obviously, the most time you can possibly give them is best for their health. The less time they're spending alone in a tiny, cramped space, the better. Now with that, your birds do need more than just a cage in order to be healthy. Your birds do need some sort of play set or play area outside of their cage. And the reason for this is largely because of territorial behaviors, but also just because of another method of enrichment. Now, again, things back there are pretty insane. You don't need to have ropes hanging off your ceiling. You don't need to have a whole room dedicated to your bird. This is nuts. But you do need to have some sort of play stand or other sort of area for your bird to hang out with. And the reason for this is that your bird simply cannot get all the enrichment it needs in one space. And if they're sitting with only one area to call their own, birds are far more likely to develop aggressive behaviors. So if you can get just a standard little play area for them to sit on and you got some toys on there, it gives them another place to go. It gives them another little place to feel safe and call home. It gives them another little area for them to explore where they don't feel that everything they need for their lives is contained inside a cage. When that happens, when your birds feel as though they're threatened if anything goes near their cage because everything they need to survive is in there, that's when your birds can start to get aggressive and become very territorial. When it comes to play areas, you don't need to go ridiculously expensive. You don't need to be buying those fancy natural wood ones with the dishes built in. I mean, I love those and I wish I had a bunch of them because they're so cool. But you don't need to go that far. And one of my favorite play stands that I've made was actually just of 2 bamboo trellises stuck upside down and tied together. It's just a basic giant triangle that you can have a ton of toys hanging off of. It has a whole bunch of different layers to it that the birds can explore. It was super cheap, all the parts were from a dollar store, and then there, bam, you've got a really cheap, easy solution for a play stand. The other most important thing when it comes to bringing your bird home is making sure that there is someone near you that can take care of them medically. This means doing your research and making sure that there is an avian veterinarian near you. Basic veterinarians that see dogs and cats and reptiles do not have the sort of medical knowledge they need in order to take care of birds. Birds' kind of anatomy and biology is so vastly different that even their blood cells are a completely different shape. Avian veterinarians have to go through a lot of extra schooling in order to have all the knowledge that they need to be able to properly operate on parrots and other species of birds. So it's very important that you do get a doctor that has this knowledge, that has what it takes and has the experience to be able to take care of your bird properly. You cannot just go to any old mammalian veterinarian and hope that they'll do good for your bird. The best thing you can do for your bird is make sure that there is an avian veterinarian in your area. The basic thing you could do to see whether or not you have avian vets in the area is just to call your local clinics and see what comes up, but the easiest way is actually going to be using the Association of Avian Veterinarians website to look up your location and seeing what avian vets are near you. When first bringing home a bird, it's incredibly important that you get them their first bird checkup. This is usually a basic blood check and a physical exam, just to make sure that there's nothing underlying that you can't quite see. Very young baby birds are very susceptible to illness, and they may not show it until it's too late. So by getting that first bird checkup, getting those blood tests done, and a quick physical exam, it'll tell you whether or not there's something you should be concerned about, so you can start getting the antibiotics or anything that you need right off the bat before it gets too far along. Now, the other reason why this is important is because it gives your vet a base understanding of your bird. So as your bird gets older and the more annual visits you do, they can see if there's any changes in their blood work that may be cause for concern. This will help them catch any sort of diseases way early on or help you see things that might be changing so you can do what's best for your bird to keep them in optimal health. One of the most important things when it comes to parrotlets specifically is how you interact with them. Now, parrotlets, as I said earlier in this video, are very aggressive birds. They don't flock in huge masses. The only time they come together like that is to eat, really. It means that these birds are very aggressive. In the wild, parrotlets will claim an entire tree for their own and they'll chase every other bird away from it. And they are not afraid to get aggressive when they need to be. They're not afraid to stand up for themselves and fight for their safety. So when it comes to interacting with a parrotlet, it is very, very important that you are watching their body language and not push them too far. Aggression is the #1 reason that birds get sent to shelters, because they got aggressive and people don't know how to handle it and they don't think they're doing anything wrong, when the reality is that you're misreading your bird. You're pushing past their limits and their boundaries, and when they're telling you no, you're pushing through it. So the bird is getting aggressive, and parrotlets are notorious for this. Anytime you Google, what owning a parrotlet is like, or it's a pain, or all it does is bite, and it's absolutely heartbreaking, because these birds aren't like that. These birds are not mean and vicious, no matter how many times you'll hear people say it. And I'll tell you they're aggressive. That doesn't mean that the bird by nature is mean and aggressive. It means that the bird has aggressive tendencies. It means they're more likely to be aggressive when put into situations where they can choose to either be submissive or aggressive. And parrotlets are not a bird that is going to jump to being submissive. They're going to aggress, and that is one of the common problems with these birds. Please pay attention to their body language. If you're seeing them kind of backing up or putting their beaks down or flaring up the back of their head feathers or flaring their tail out at you, do not keep pushing into them and force them to step up. You do not need to force them and get them to that point where they feel it necessary to become these aggressive little terrors that everybody thinks that parrotlets are. If you can see just how snuggly little ZB is back here, you can see they can absolutely be sweet little birds that just kind of want to book it into your hair and snuggle up next to your neck. They don't need to get aggressive. They only get aggressive because they feel it's necessary, because we aren't listening to them. So that's gonna about do it for this video. That was just sort of the absolute basics. I'm sure I could ramble on for millions of more videos of all the sorts of tiny little details that go into taking the best possible care we can for our birds, but that's gonna do it for this time, just the sort of basics to hopefully give you some topics to do some more research into. And that is incredibly important. Please do not take this video as one thing means all, now you know everything about birds. Please do not interpret this video that way. Just take this video as sorts of topics that now you can do more research into, some ideas that maybe you haven't heard of before that you can look into. Do anything you can to continue learning. Because that is the biggest mistake we can make as pet owners, is to stop learning. When it comes to parrots, the amount of care that has changed over the past 5 or 10 years is incredible. They used to be living in tiny little round cages with no enrichment and nothing but a mirror, and now so much more research has happened and we know so much more. And the care we can give to them has gotten so much better. And we cannot ever think that we've hit the peak. We can never believe that we know everything and just stop learning. If someone ever offers you a new idea or says something like, oh, hey, have you considered doing it this way instead? Or I don't think this is quite right, don't shut it down right away. Take those couple seconds to consider it, go home, do some research, and form your own opinion on it. Do not ever hit that point where you feel like you know everything. Because the second we stop learning, is the second we stop taking the best possible care for our birds. So please do your research, do as much as you possibly can, and even when you have a bird, never stop reading, never stop learning, and please always do your best to do the absolute best you can for your bird. So thank you all for watching. As always, if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and any moments I have, I will do my best to answer them with as much detail as I can. I hope this video was helpful and maybe gave you guys some things to consider. And so that'll about do it. So thank you all for being here, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye! Oh, hi! What are you doing? Yeah.